G'day, Richard Austin here again from marketingwithestateplanning.com. Today I want to tell you a story. It's a true story about an experience I had many years ago when I was working in Australia. And if I was writing this down, I'd call it the murderer's will. One afternoon a guy came into my office. I walked in off the street, didn't have an appointment, told me he wanted to make a new will. He said he'd made a will years ago, but he didn't have a copy. He couldn't remember who he'd made it with, the usual story. So he wanted to start from scratch and make a new one, and he wanted to get it done pretty quickly. Now at the time I thought there was something a bit odd about this guy. I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was, but he seemed pretty agitated, a bit stressed, but really there's nothing unusual about that, is there? I mean, lots of people feel like that when they go to make a will, when they go to see their lawyer or their accountant. So I took his instructions. I talked to him about his family, his personal situation, what his options were, what he needed to cover in his estate planning, and he made an appointment to come back and see me in a couple of days so we could go through the documents that I was going to prepare for him. So far so good, you might think. Now, my hometown's a pretty quiet spot. There's not too much in the way of violent crime, so a murder's pretty big news, and a couple of days later that's just what we got. Big news. There'd been a murder. A teenage girl had been assaulted and then murdered, and the body had been dumped on a road, one of the roads heading out of town. Nasty business. Very sad news, of course, but I didn't know the girl, I didn't know her family, I didn't really feel any close connection with what had happened, except just the usual feeling that we all have when something like that happens, just being grateful and thankful that it wasn't closer to home for me. All that was about to change though. My new client had been back to my office in the meantime and signed his new will. With hindsight, he was probably a bit more stressed and a bit more uptight than on his first visit, but not to the point where I had any concerns at all about whether he understood the will or whether he had the capacity to be signing it properly. I didn't have that sort of concern about his state of mind, but I just had the feeling that something wasn't quite right. One of my colleagues, Jim, witnessed the will with me, and he thought the fellow was a bit odd as well, but probably no more so than plenty of the other clients have all had in their offices from time to time, and I didn't think too much more about it until about a week later when I was watching the news on TV at night. The police had made an arrest in the murder and charged someone. And you're right, it was my new client, the bloke who had to get his affairs in order and make sure he had an up-to-date will. And the phone at home rang just a few seconds later. It was Jim. "Hey," he said, "isn't that the bloke whose will I witnessed in your office last week? What sort of clients have you got coming in there?" Sure enough, in between coming in and giving me his instructions, then coming back and signing his new will, this guy had planned and carried out a brutal murder, but not without having had the presence of mind to get his affairs in order first. Now, I'm not sure how you'd characterise this type of thinking. It's not normal, that's for sure, but this story does illustrate that some people really do appreciate how important estate planning is, doesn't it? I mean, can you imagine what else must have been going through this bloke's mind? Obviously he was having some kind of crisis, a breakdown. He couldn't control what was going on in his head, and it all ended in tragedy, and yet he still, in his own twisted way, was thinking about what he had to do for his family's future and what he had to do to provide for them if he wasn't around. It still makes me shiver, that story, when I think about it. Anyway, feel free to tell your clients the story of the murderer's will. Just make sure you've got a clear escape path worked out first, because you just never know who's sitting across the desk from you, do you? That's about it for now. Bye.